My brother leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with triumph. "No benefits, no claims she's a fake vet." He jeered as the will was read. The words landed like a slap, and a few relatives even smirked. I stayed perfectly still, my hands folded my father's watch heavy on my wrist. They thought my silence was weakness. What they missed was Raphael, my lawyer, sliding a sealed envelope into the judge's hand. The wax broke with a faint snap. The judge's face went pale, his eyes darting to the armed officers by the doors. "Seal this court immediately," he barked. That order was the echo of a decision I had made months earlier, one none of them could have imagined. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Stories like mine aren't just drama, they're survival. If you've felt that sting of being silenced or doubted, this is the place where your voice matters. I grew up learning that silence could be louder than any scream. In my family, silence was my role. At our dinner table, the spotlight was always on Lucas. My brother had a way of filling every corner of the room, his voice bouncing off the walls like it owned them. Mom would beam at him, hanging on every word about his new real estate projects, his latest triumphs, his endless promises of more. Dad would listen too, though his approval came quieter, more measured. I sat at the same table, cutting my chicken into tiny squares, waiting for someone to notice I was there. I remember one night in particular. The smell of roast beef hung heavy, and the clinking of wine glasses echoed in my ears. Lucas had just announced he'd secured some big deal, and the room erupted into applause. Champagne cork popped, spraying a mist that caught the chandelier light. My heart raced. I had news, too. That week, I'd been quietly commended at work for analysis that had redirected an entire operation overseas. It wasn't something I could brag about, not really, but I wanted to share at least the recognition. I cleared my throat. "I actually got recognized at work this week. Mom didn't even let me finish." She patted my hand with that syrupy sweetness of hers. "That's nice, dear. Like Employee of the Month." Then she turned back to Lucas. "Your brother just secured the Henderson property. We're so proud." I nodded, my smile tight, but inside it felt like swallowing glass. I didn't know it then, but that night would come back to haunt me. Another memory. Thanksgiving. The house smelled of sage and turkey, a dozen voices filling the air. Lucas walked in late, carrying a bottle of red wine, and the room lit up as if a celebrity had arrived. I had spent the entire morning helping Dad fix the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, my sleeves wet and my patience thinner than the pipes. But when I came down, no one asked where I'd been. They were too busy cheering Lucas for making time to show up. When dinner ended, Dad offered dessert. Lucas got the first slice of pumpkin pie, the big one with extra whipped cream. My plate sat empty until finally Dad noticed. "Oh, Maya, you want pie too." The slice he gave me was thin, a leftover edge. I didn't complain. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. Christmas was worse. Snow piled high against the windows, muffling the outside world. Inside, wrapping paper ripped bows flew across the carpet. Lucas opened his gift, a leather briefcase, shiny and expensive. He swung it by the handle, grinning like he'd just been crowned king. My gift, a sweater 2 sizes too big with the tag still dangling. Mom's excuse I thought it might shrink in the wash. Everyone laughed. I forced a laugh too, hugging the itchy fabric to my chest. My skin burned where the wool scratched, but the real itch was in my throat. I didn't know it then, but that sweater became the uniform of my role. The afterthought, the filler, the one who could be overlooked without consequence. In college, I worked 2 jobs to cover what scholarships couldn't. One shift at a diner, the smell of burnt coffee sticking to my hair, and another at the library where fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. Every paycheck I saved, I mailed home to help. Lucas used the money to pay for spring break trips. We're family, he'd shrug, as if that explained everything. One night, I came home to find Dad asleep in his recliner, the TV flickering blue across his tired face. Mom sat at the table, flipping through Lucas's glossy brochures, pride shining in her eyes. My envelope of cash was gone from the counter. No one asked me how I managed. No one wanted to know. I swallowed that too, but it carved deeper than I thought. Then came the funeral. The scent of lilies was suffocating, heavy and sweet. I stood in the crowded room, a ghost at my own father's farewell. Lucas was at the center, shaking hands, accepting condolences with one hand while scrolling his phone with the other. Mom hovered nearby, her hand on his arm like he was the grieving widow instead of the son. Carl Whitaker, a family friend and retired officer, found me near the back. His eyes softened with genuine sympathy. "Your father was proud of you, Maya," he said quietly. Before I could answer, Lucas slung an arm around my shoulders. "Don't mind her," he chuckled to the colonel. "She's got one of those government desk jobs, tracks staples all day. Most dangerous thing she's ever faced is a paper cut." The colonel's eyes flicked toward me, searching. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Something in me froze then, not from pain, but from clarity. Lucas thought it was just another joke. He didn't know he'd just slandered me in front of the one man who might have understood. I didn't know it then, but that frozen moment was the seed of everything that came later. After the service, Mom handed me Dad's watch, a heavy, old-fashioned piece with a leather strap worn soft from years of use. "He wanted you to have this," she said, simply, then turned away to follow Lucas into the throng of admirers. I held the watch in my palm, the second hand ticking steady. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I noticed something strange. On the back, etched so faintly it was almost invisible, were numbers, coordinates, a safe deposit number. My pulse quickened. Dad had left me more than a watch, he'd left me a key. I didn't open the deposit box right away. I wasn't ready, but the knowledge burned in the back of my mind, a silent countdown I couldn't ignore. Even now, when I replay those memories, I smell the roast beef, the sage, the burnt coffee, the lilies. I hear the champagne corks, the laughter, the dismissive pats on my hand. Each moment carved me hollow. Each silence became another brick in the wall between me and them. But beneath the silence, another life pulsed. They thought I was the librarian, the quiet failure who washed out of a PhD program. What they never knew was that those missing years were spent inside windowless rooms, concrete walls humming with servers, my voice steady as I relayed decisions that shifted the balance of entire regions. My call sign was Echo 7, and Echo 7 was the only reason I could sit in that courtroom later, calm, silent, watching my brother play his last hand without realizing I'd already reshuffled the entire deck. The weeks after the funeral felt like living in two different worlds stitched together with barbed wire. By day, I was Echo 7, sitting in a windowless skiff, eyes locked on satellite feeds that could determine life or death. By night, I was the forgotten daughter again, my phone buzzing with family messages I didn't want to read. The first crack came from Mom. She called me one evening while I was still at my desk, the hum of the servers louder than her voice. "Maya, your cousin's wedding is coming up," she said, sweetness dripping like honey that's gone sour. "You'll come early, won't you? Help set things up. You've always been good at running errands." I pinched the bridge of my nose. I had spent the past 12 hours coordinating an operation across 3 time zones. My mind was still on encrypted signals, not flower arrangements. "I'm not sure I can." "You can," she cut in. "Lucas is walking her down the aisle. Everyone will be looking at him. We need you behind the scenes, making sure things go smoothly. Don't let me down." The call ended before I could answer. I stared at the phone pulse pounding. My silence wasn't obedience anymore, but she didn't know that. Then Lucas started spreading rumors. A cousin messaged me out of the blue. "Heard you tried to trick Grandpa with fake military stories." "Is that true?" I nearly dropped my coffee. Rumors moved like wildfire in our family, and Lucas had poured the gasoline himself. He told anyone who'd listen that I was trying to steal Dad's estate, that my so-called service was a fantasy. One night I scrolled through Facebook, my eyes catching on a post from an aunt I barely spoke to. Sad when people pretend to be heroes for money. Dozens of likes. A few comments about poor Lucas having to deal with such betrayal. I slammed the laptop shut. My throat burned, but no sound came out. That silence carved deeper than I thought. The third blow came from outside. A podcast episode dropped from Family Watch, a tabloid-style channel that lived off other people's dirty laundry. The title glared at me, "Fake Vet Sister Steals from Her Own Family, the Reed Case." I hit play. My mother's voice wasn't there, but the phrasing was too familiar. Sources close to the family claimed I'd lied for years, faked a government job, and brainwashed Dad before he died. I froze at my desk earbuds and the smell of burnt coffee lingering from the pot down the hall. My stomach twisted. I knew exactly where those words had come from. Vivian, my own mother. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I just saved the episode link, forwarded it to Raphael, and let the anger calcify into something colder. Even as my family tore me apart, my other world didn't stop. At DIA, I was still Echo 7, and Echo 7 had work to do. One night, my screen lit up with heat signatures moving across a border. My pulse hammered as I typed commands, shifting resources, rerouting satellites. My headset crackled. Echo 7, confirm blind harvest protocol. I steadied my voice. Confirmed. Execute. Somewhere out there, people lived because I made that call. Yet, at home, I was the family fraud. I remember standing up after that shift, my knees weak fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I caught my reflection in the CF's steel door. My face looked calm, almost detached. But inside, the two worlds were tearing each other apart. The breaking point came in the form of a text from Mom. Lucas is under so much stress with the will. Can't you fix this? Call your lawyer? Tell him to drop it. Family comes first. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from fury so sharp it felt surgical. Family comes first. It had always meant Lucas came first. His comfort, his reputation, his lies. I typed nothing back. I simply set the phone down, the leather strap of Dad's watch pressing into my skin. That was the moment the shift happened. I wasn't going to defend myself with words anymore. I was going to let the truth defend me. And the truth was heavier than any rumor. Raphael called that same night. His voice was calm, steady. We don't fight his story with arguments. We let him hang himself with his own words. He has to swear under oath. Once he does, we deliver the document. One move. That's it. I exhaled slowly. So we wait, and we prepare. This is not about feelings, Maya. It's about precision. It's an operation, nothing less. He was right. It wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a mission, and I had never failed a mission. In those weeks leading up to court, my worlds collided. During the day, I analyzed encrypted chatter, made calls that shifted strategies overseas. At night, I sifted through venomous emails from relatives, whispers of betrayal, the humiliation of being called a fraud. But the deeper the cuts, the clearer my focus became. I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I wasn't the employee of the month joke. I was Echo 7, and Echo 7 knew exactly how to finish this. The probate courtroom smelled of old wood and dust like secrets trapped in oak. Light from high windows cut into harsh white stripes across the benches. The air buzzed with whispers my relatives packed in behind Lucas like an army of believers. I sat at the front table, hands folded, Dad's watch pressing into my skin. Raphael sat beside me, silent, unreadable. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. We'd rehearsed this moment 100 times without saying a word. The bailiff called the room to order. Lucas strode to the witness stand, smoothing his suit jacket with the confidence of a man who believed the room belonged to him. Mom's eyes followed him, pride radiating like heat. He swore, his oath, right hand raised, lips curling into the faintest smirk. Mr. Reed, the judge, began his tone flat. You may proceed. Lucas leaned into the microphone, voice low and deliberate like a man savoring poison. My sister, he said, pausing just long enough to make sure everyone leaned in, has never served a single day. No discharge papers, no benefits, no claims. She lied to our dying father to steal what was mine. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone gasped. Another nodded. Lucas smiled wider. It's stolen valor, plain and simple. The words hit me like glass shattering, but I didn't flinch. My hands stayed folded. My breath stayed even. He thought my silence was surrender. He didn't know silence was my weapon. Lucas sat back smug, his performance complete. The judge scribbled notes, annoyance flickering at the delay this would cause. That was the moment Raphael stood. He didn't speak at first. He simply walked to the bailiff, a single manila envelope in his hand. The wax seal gleamed blood red under the courtroom lights. He placed it on the judge's bench with the kind of calm that shifts atmospheres. "Your Honor," Raphael said, voice level, "this document is for in-camera review only." The judge sighed, impatient, as if this was a nuisance. He broke the seal with a flick of his thumb. The crack of wax echoed like a gunshot. Then everything changed. His eyes scanned the letterhead and the color drained from his face. His posture stiffened, boredom gone replaced by rigid alarm. He read quickly, lips tightening, then looked up not at Raphael, not at me, but at the two armed officers by the doors. "Officers," his voice snapped sharp and urgent, "seal this courtroom. Immediately." The heavy oak doors slammed shut, bolts sliding into place with a thud that made Mom flinch. A hush fell so absolute it felt suffocating. Lucas shifted in his seat, confusion etching into his features. What is this?" The judge ignored him. He turned to the court reporter. "You are off the record now." Keys clacked, then silence. Finally, the judge's gaze landed on Lucas. His words cut like ice. "Mr. Reed, you have made sworn accusations regarding the service status of a United States government employee." He held up the letter. "This document confirms her service is a matter of national security. Further questioning is forbidden by law." Lucas blinked, his smirk dissolving into open-mouthed disbelief. "That's not she's lying enough," the judge snapped. His voice carried a weight that silenced the room. "Your baseless claims on a federal record may constitute an attempt to expose a protected operative. You are to remain silent. A U.S. Marshal will take your statement after we conclude." I watched my brother shrink, the swagger bleeding out of him. His eyes darted to Mom, but she looked pale, her hands trembling in her lap. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her face. Not fear for me, fear for herself. The judge turned toward me then. His expression softened, his voice quieter, laced with something that sounded almost like respect. "Ma'am," he said, the honorific, deliberate. "My apologies. We will adjourn to chambers to finalize the will as written." I inclined my head, slow, deliberate. I still hadn't spoken a word. I didn't need to. The gavel struck. Court is in recess. The bailiff called order, but the room was already unraveling. Whispers rose like smoke. My relatives stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Eyes wide, mouths open, the narrative they'd swallowed for years crumbling in seconds. Lucas remained frozen on the stand. His suit rumpled, his jaw slack. The man who had always been the center of attention now looked like a child caught in a lie too big to escape. As I stood my chair, scraping softly against the floor, I felt Dad's watch tick against my wrist. A cold smile tugged at my lips, fleeting, then gone. The silence I carried all my life had just become the loudest sound in the room. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the air felt different, crisp, sharp, almost electric. The sun hit the marble steps, blinding after the dim, oak-paneled courtroom. Raphael walked at my side, his face unreadable, the sealed letter now locked back in his briefcase. At the curb, 2 U.S. Marshals guided Lucas toward an unmarked black sedan. His expensive suit sagged, his hair damp with sweat. For the first time, his eyes met mine without arrogance. What I saw there wasn't anger, it was terror. A silent plea, childish and desperate. "Fix this. Be my sister again." I held his gaze for a heartbeat, then turned away. The click of my heels on the stone steps was louder than his protests. Behind me, Mom tried to call my name. Her voice cracked thin and shaky, stripped of its sweetness. I didn't turn. I didn't give her the chance to weave me back into her story. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the deposit box key my father had left hidden in his watch. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed and worn, his handwriting steady. "Maya, I know the truth you carry. I may never speak of it, but I see you. I trust you." Tears blurred the words, but my chest felt steady for the first time in years. A buzz shook my phone. A notification from Family Watch. A new post-correction source in Reed case retracted. No apology, just a retreat. Raphael had already done his work. But tucked in my email folder was something else he'd uncovered, a string of messages, all from Mom's account feeding lies to the podcast. proof that the poison had started at home. I didn't show it to anyone. Not yet. Some truths are weapons, and weapons work best when no one sees them coming. I leaned back, eyes on the map glowing across my SIF monitor. Missions awaited. The world spun on, and so did I. They thought the courtroom was the end. They didn't know it was only the first strike. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't over. What happened in that courtroom was only the beginning. There are still truths buried under years of silence, still battles waiting in the shadows. And when the time comes, I'll be ready. Stay with me, because sometimes the quietest voice leaves the deepest scar.